The moment I found out, wasn't anything like the movies. There wasn't lipstick on a collar. No mysterious hotel receipt or half-button shirt. No dramatic boyfriend. It was simpler. Almost stupid, really. She left her AirPods connected to the living room TV. I come home early that Tuesday. Work sent us home because the sprinkler system flooded the break room. I didn't text her I was on my way. No need. She wouldn't be home anyway. Lately, meetings ran long. Gym classes doubled in length. Her friends changed every week. I dropped my keys on the counter, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and slumped onto the couch. Turned on the TV. The sound didn't come through. I clicked the volume up. Nothing. Tried changing channels. Still nothing. Then I saw the notification. Audio is playing through Lena's AirPods. She wasn't home, but they were. Connected. Still in range. That's when I heard it, faintly, like a whisper leaking from the hallway. Muffled voices. I followed the sound like I was moving through a dream. The AirPods were still in her coat pocket, her coat hanging in the laundry room. I pulled them out, confused until I realized they were still playing whatever had been streaming before I turned on the TV. So I listened, and that's when my stomach dropped into my knees. It was her voice, clear as day. No, I told you. He has no idea. He thinks I'm just tired or busy or whatever. He doesn't even ask anymore. Laughter. A man's voice. Confident. Smug. Poor guy, he said. Still trying? She laughed harder. Curtis wouldn't notice a wildfire in his bedroom. He just wants peace and leftovers. I stood there, holding those little white earbuds like they were knives. My ears burned. My fingers shook. My heart. I couldn't even feel it anymore. The rest of the conversation blurred together. Something about hotel weekends. Acting exhausted at home. A joke about me reading truck manuals for fun. They were having a good time. And I was the joke. I didn't throw the AirPods. I didn't scream. I didn't smash the TV. I just walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and stared at the wall for a long time. Not a photo. Not a clock. Just the empty, silent wall, where nothing was playing and no one was pretending. It wasn't even betrayal that hurt the most. It was that she stopped hiding it. She didn't care if I heard, or if I broke. That was the moment I knew I couldn't fix it. That she wasn't waiting for me to try. That she hadn't been mine for a long, long time. And yet, I didn't leave that day. I stayed. Ate leftovers in silence. Watched a documentary I didn't care about. Slept beside her while she scrolled through her phone, claiming headache. But that was the last night I let myself believe anything would change. Because once someone starts mocking you behind closed doors, it's only a matter of time before they lock them completely. For the next few days, I lived like a guest in my own life. I didn't confront her. I didn't even mention the AirPods. Part of me wanted to throw them down on the table and say I heard it all. Every damn word. But a bigger part of me needed to know how deep the rot went. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was studying the collapse from inside it. On Thursday night, I pretended to be asleep on the couch. She came home at 11:48 p.m. I remember the time because I was watching the little microwave clock tick just to hear something alive. She didn't tiptoe. She didn't apologize. She walked straight to the bedroom, humming. She hummed, like a teenager after a perfect date. She didn't even peek into the living room to check if I was breathing. The next morning, she made toast. One slice, only for herself. I sat at the table. She scrolled her phone. Didn't say good morning. Didn't ask about work. Didn't even flinch when my coffee mug cracked against the granite. Not a glance. At 3:12 that afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. Just one sentence. You deserve to know what hotel they use. I stared at it for 10 minutes before I responded. Who is this? No reply. The next message came 5 hours later. It was a location pin and the name of a small boutique hotel in the next town over. Not the kind of place anyone goes for conferences or layovers. Too cozy for business. Too expensive for no reason. Too quiet to leave a digital trace unless you're looking. I sat with that pin all night. Didn't sleep. Barely blinked. I was caught between heartbreak and something darker. Not rage, but reality. The kind you can't unsee once it's in motion. The next morning, I drove there. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But what I found shattered the last illusion I had about my marriage. The hotel was nice, too nice for a woman who said she was cutting back on grocery spending. It was set back from the road, hidden behind tall pines and a looping driveway like it was guarding secrets. And it was. I parked across the street and waited. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, but I forced myself to stay still. At 9:17 a.m., I saw her car. She was driving. And next to her, a man I'd never seen before, but who somehow already felt familiar. He was the one from the AirPod recording. I knew it before I saw his face. The smirk matched the voice. The way he placed his hand on her lower back before they walked in, like he'd done 100 times. Like my life had been his playground for months. I didn't follow them in. I didn't take pictures. I didn't call a lawyer. I called my brother. He answered on the third ring, groggy. "Hey man, everything all right? I need to crash at your place for a few days," I said, voice flat. "Don't ask questions. Just please say yes." He didn't hesitate. "Of course. You're already packed." "No, but I'm about to be." I went home. She wasn't back yet. I packed one duffel bag, just clothes, my laptop, a couple old journals I didn't want to leave behind. Nothing that would trigger suspicion. Then I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my reflection in the window, and realized something I hadn't let myself accept until that moment. I didn't want to fix this. I didn't want therapy or closure or some dramatic confrontation where I demanded answers. I didn't even want an apology. I just wanted to disappear before her betrayal finished hollowing me out completely. So I left the keys on the counter. I didn't leave a note. She wouldn't have read it anyway. As I stepped outside and shut the door, I looked back one last time, not at the house, but at the ghost of the man I used to be inside it. He didn't wave goodbye. He didn't beg her to change. He just let me go. By the time I reached my brother's place, I felt like a silhouette of myself. He gave me the guest room, didn't ask questions, and I was grateful for that. Sometimes silence from someone who genuinely cares is the only noise you can survive. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I didn't scream or punch walls or replay the AirPod recording in my head 100 times. I just lay on my back staring at the ceiling fan, waiting for my mind to slow down. It never did. 2 days passed. On the third morning, I woke up to a message from the same unknown number. Room 304. Ask for the receipt. Don't tell her. That's all it said. I stared at it like it was radioactive. I knew exactly which hotel it meant. My stomach twisted. I tried to rationalize it away. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe someone was messing with me. But that voice inside me, the one I'd been trying to ignore for months, told me to go. I drove back. Not shaking this time. Just blank. The woman at the front desk was probably in her 20s, polite, bored, tapping through something on her phone when I stepped in. I gave her a fake smile and leaned slightly over the counter. "I'm trying to get a copy of a receipt from a stay earlier this week," I said. "For business records." She raised an eyebrow. "Name?" I said Lena's full name, then added, "Room 304. She typed, paused, then looked at me like I just walked in naked. "I'm sorry, but that room wasn't booked under that name." I blinked. "Can you double-check?" She did, then turned the screen toward me, just for a second. Not enough to memorize anything, but enough for one word to jump out and stab me in the chest. Donovan. Not her last name. Not mine. Not even close. Someone else booked it. So Lena wasn't just cheating. She was being kept. The receipt was printed, folded neatly, and placed in a sealed envelope. I said, "Thank you," with a tight smile and walked back to my car, envelope gripped like a verdict. I opened it inside the vehicle, hands trembling for the first time in days. There were 2 nights on the receipt. Fancy champagne, chocolate-covered strawberries, room service at 2:13 a.m., filet mignon and scallops, breakfast in bed, and one additional charge that made my pulse go dead still. In-room photography package. What? I reread it. Photography. Not food. Not flowers. Pictures. I scanned to the bottom. Attached was a phone number for follow-up services. A separate business. Not the hotel. I shouldn't have called. I know that now. But I did. A woman answered. Calm. Efficient. Her voice smooth like someone who works with people who ask no questions. "Lux Capture Studios," she said. "How can I help you?" I gave her the confirmation number listed beside the charge and said I was following up on images from a recent session. There was a pause. Then one moment. Music played. Classical. Too clean. Then she returned. Those images were delivered digitally through our private client portal, password protected. If you're the recipient, you would have received a confirmation email. I faked a chuckle. Right, yeah, it must have gone to spam. Can you tell me the email address it was sent to? She hesitated. Sir, for privacy reasons, I can't. I'm the one who paid for it, I lied. I just want to make sure my wife got the pictures. Another pause. Then she said the email. It wasn't Lena's, but I recognized it. The username was just one word. Donovan Wrights. That same first name from the booking. I didn't hang up. I just let the phone fall into my lap, buzzing softly with the line, still active. Because now I wasn't just dealing with an affair. I was dealing with someone who was documenting it. Proudly. Intentionally. And sending the results to someone using a writing alias. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was starring in someone's story. I didn't eat that day. Couldn't. The realization that Lena wasn't just having an affair, but was starring in some kind of twisted narrative written and archived by a man calling himself Donovan Wrights hit me harder than any image ever could. It meant this wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't a mistake. It was structured, planned, romanticized, published, maybe. For who? For him? For readers? For her? I was starting to realize I hadn't just been left behind in my marriage. I'd been written out of it. Later that night, once the sun went down and my hands had finally stopped shaking, I did what any normal person probably would have done first. I searched for the name. Not Donovan, but Donovan Wrights. And there he was. Not on Facebook, not on LinkedIn, on a blog, a personal storytelling blog. It wasn't a huge site, looked like something out of 2012. Dark background, gold serif font, artsy header that read, Fragments of the Unspoken. I didn't breathe as I scrolled. The first post was titled, Room 304. She came dressed for goodbye. I clicked it. What I read, I can barely describe. It was a short story, but not fiction. Not really. It described a woman who walks like a thunderstorm in heels, who sips champagne with one hand and kills loyalty with the other. It described the exact hotel I had been to, the exact food, the in-room photography session, where she let me capture her final rebellion before she returns to silence. And the worst part? He called the husband the wallpaper. That was me. I knew it. The man who, as he wrote, never once knew the house he lived in had already changed owners. I had to stop myself from throwing my laptop across the room. There were 7 more stories, all written over the last 5 months, all starring her, under different metaphors, different poetic disguises. The woman who became a secret, the smile that no longer lived at home, the sleepwalker with purpose. And each post got comments. Not a lot, but enough to make my skin crawl. People loved her. They didn't know her name, of course, but they wrote things like, This woman sounds electric. Whoever she is, she's choosing life over boredom. Respect. You captured freedom with teeth. Beautiful work. Freedom. That's what they called it. My wife was someone else's muse, and the pain I'd swallowed for months, the confusion, the gaslighting, the nights I wondered if I was going crazy, had been turned into performance art. I closed the laptop and stared at the wall. For a long time, this wasn't just cheating. It was mythology. She had rewritten our love story and sold it off, one post at a time, to strangers who thought I was some boring husband who didn't see her fire. And I still hadn't confronted her. Not once. I was living in the rubble of our marriage, and she didn't even know I'd picked up a single brick. That changed the next day. I drove back to the house. She was home. I knew from the car in the driveway, the same one I used to fill with gas and vacuum out for her birthdays. I didn't plan to go inside. I just wanted to look at her once. Face to face. Not with rage, not with demands. I just needed to see what kind of eyes belong to a person who lets the man she married be reduced to a literary ghost. But before I could knock, the front door opened. She was already walking out, on the phone, laughing. Her hair done, lipstick on, like she was heading to a premiere. And then she saw me. The laugh stopped. The smile dropped. She lowered the phone. Curtis, she said, Like my name tasted wrong. I looked at her, really looked, and asked the one thing I hadn't asked yet. Do you love him? She didn't answer right away. She glanced away, down the street, then said something I'll never forget. I love who I am with him. And in that second, I realized something even darker. It wasn't just about him. She didn't leave me for someone better. She left me for a version of herself that didn't exist until she betrayed everything we built together. After she said it, I love who I am with him, I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't ask her to explain. Because what she really meant was clear. I was never supposed to see this version of her. It belonged to someone else now. Maybe it never belonged to me. I turned and walked away. I didn't even make it to the car. I stood in the middle of the driveway, not knowing whether to scream or laugh or crumble. I looked up at the house, our house, and remembered how I'd once carried her through that door on our wedding night because she said she wanted the movie moment. The movie was over. I stayed with my brother another few days. He didn't push, just handed me beers at the right moments and made me watch dumb action movies with explosions big enough to drown out memory. But something didn't sit right. The blog, the photographs, the detailed writing, the confidence. This man, Donovan, wasn't some casual fling. He was methodical. He was building something out of her, an identity, a character, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't all just about romance or ego. So I started digging, not for revenge, not for ammo, for clarity. Lena had always been careless with tech. She used the same password for years, her old dog's name and her birth year. I logged into our shared router admin panel from my laptop. The IP history was still there, still tied to devices in the house. That's when I saw it, something that shouldn't have been there. A device name, Donovan_M2. The MAC address matched a laptop. Someone had used his personal device on our Wi-Fi. Not in passing. Not once. Multiple times over the past 2 months. Which meant one thing. He had been in my home. While I was at work. While I was grocery shopping. While I was folding the laundry she no longer wore. Suddenly the pieces started rearranging. The misplaced cologne I couldn't identify in the bathroom a few weeks ago. The fact that the patio chair was sometimes moved even though we never used it. The one time the thermostat had reset itself to guest mode. He had been here. Inside the home I paid for. The home I bled into for 11 years. Sleeping in my bed? Drinking from my coffee mugs? And she let him. Worse, she probably smiled when he did. Something in me snapped. Not with violence, but with awareness. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was occupation. A full psychological override of our shared life. And somehow I had been too trusting, too passive, too blind to see it. I called the hotel again. Not for receipts this time. I asked to speak with their security department. The woman transferred me without hesitation. A man named Jacob answered, friendly but cautious. I explained I had reason to believe someone was impersonating a writer and using the hotel for undisclosed content creation. I made up a story, that I was a lawyer investigating intellectual property misuse. He asked for proof. I gave him the blog URL, the in-room photo session reference, the exact confirmation code. Said the content may have involved use of the hotel brand without licensing. There was a pause. Then he said something strange. I'm going to need to escalate this. What do you mean? I asked. Another pause. That's not a photography package we offer. We don't have any vendor called Lux Capture Studios. In fact, we've had 3 internal complaints in the past 6 months about unauthorized filming. We just haven't had proof. He said uplights. He continued. Did you say he goes by Donovan? Because that's not the name on the booking. I held my breath. Then who is? I can't legally tell you the full name without a subpoena, but I'll say this much. That name shows up in 2 other incidents we flagged. One involved a hidden camera found in a room's air vent last year. Same email domain. I didn't speak. I couldn't. This man wasn't just a writer. He was documenting women. Maybe more than just Lena. Maybe not with their full knowledge. And now my wife might have been manipulated into more than she even realizes. After that call with hotel security, I felt something shift inside me. The pain, the heartbreak, They didn't vanish, but they took a back seat to something stronger. Urgency. There was a bigger story playing out here. I had only seen pieces of it. And I wasn't going to just sit in a borrowed room with borrowed peace while someone turned my marriage into a voyeur's playground. So I went back to the house. Not to see her. She wasn't there anyway. But I still had the garage code. She hadn't changed it. Probably didn't think I would use it. Probably thought I was too broken. I wasn't broken. I was awake. I slipped into the bedroom like a thief, heart pounding, watching for any sign that he'd been here recently. I checked drawers, checked corners. Nothing unusual, except her phone charger had been moved to the guest room. Why? Who had been using that room? But the answer didn't come from the physical space. It came from her iPad, still linked to our old cloud account. She never deactivated it. I only remember it existed because it buzzed when I picked up a framed photo on the dresser and set it down a little too hard. One swipe and I was in. She never changed the passcode. Still her sister's birthday. Still predictable. The first thing I opened wasn't her messages, her photos, or even her browser history. It was her calendar app. Why? Because I remembered she'd started scheduling everything recently: therapy, fitness, book clubs, even meditation. She once bragged about color-coding her weeks. And buried inside one of the color-coded days, listed innocently under Pilates, was an entry marked only with a single emoji: movie camera. The notes section was locked with Face ID, but iCloud had backed it up in plain text. I opened her iCloud notes on the iPad, scrolled, and there it was. The title was The Agreement. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a legal contract. It wasn't signed, but it read like a manual for performance. Bullet points. All names remained pseudonyms. Nothing filmed in shared spaces without consent. Recordings used exclusively for written content, not redistribution. Curtis is never to be mentioned directly. That one punched me in the chest. But then came the kicker, a final line in bold. If I ever back out, everything is destroyed. No trace, no archive. I stared at those words for a long time. This wasn't a romance. This wasn't even manipulation in the usual sense. This was curated betrayal. Consent wrapped in performance. A digital fantasy where she gave someone else the right to rewrite our life with her body, her voice, her laughter, as long as it stayed fiction. She hadn't been tricked. She had agreed. But for some reason, she didn't want me erased completely. I was still off limits by name, still behind a locked door. And that made it worse, because it meant she still knew what she was doing. She just didn't care enough to stop. I closed the iPad and sat on the edge of the bed, realizing that the room felt like a film set now. Our photos, the throw pillows I bought, even the smell of her lotion. All props. And then my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I answered. A man's voice. Calm. Educated. Almost smug. I imagine by now you've read the agreement, he said. My mouth went dry. Who is this? You know who I am, he said. And since you're clearly going to keep poking around, let's be civil. You have questions. I can offer context. Truth, unfiltered. In exchange, you stop looking for the things you're not ready to see. I'm not interested in games, I said, barely keeping my voice steady. It's not a game, Curtis, he replied. It's a story. You just weren't the protagonist. The line clicked off, and that's when I knew. He'd been watching me, too. That call haunted me more than anything Lena had done. Not because of what he said, but how he said it. Like I was a loose character, off script, crashing through a story I was never meant to read. He wasn't worried. He didn't sound afraid I might retaliate or go public. No, he sounded amused. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I took a drive. Back roads, empty streets, the kind of long stretches where the world forgets you. I pulled over in front of a 24-hour diner that I didn't plan to enter. I sat there in silence, engine off, watching my own reflection in the windshield as the streetlight above me flickered. And then I opened the blog again. The entries were still there, but something was different. There was a new post, just uploaded minutes ago, titled, "The Husband with Nowhere to Go." I clicked. Every part of me screamed not to, but I clicked. It was me. There was no name, but it was me. It described a man who watched his life from outside the glass, who searched for facts like they'd bring him peace, unaware that he was the last person in the room to realize he was being written. He even described the garage code. The moment I stood in the driveway. The exact words I said to Lena. He wasn't guessing. He had been there. Either he'd watched us through cameras or, and this thought chilled me to the core, she'd told him everything. Every word. Every move. My phone buzzed again. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Not this time. Instead, I went home. Not my brother's. Home. The house was dark. Her car was gone. I let myself in with the same garage code I now realized he probably used, too. I walked into the living room and just stood there. I stared at the ceiling. I didn't even know what I was looking for. A lens? A reflection? Avant? And then I noticed it. Behind the row of books on the top shelf of the corner cabinet, something was wedged between the books and the wall. Small. Black. Blinking. I pulled it out. Aiden Wi-Fi camera. Still warm. I didn't know whether to vomit or scream. Instead, I sat down on the floor with it in my hands and whispered into the lens. I see you now. I didn't smash it. I turned it toward the wall. Then I stood up and went into the guest room, the one I hadn't set foot in for weeks. Inside, everything was perfectly arranged. Sheets tucked, military style. Air freshener by the window. But the giveaway was in the trash can. A receipt. Coffee. A sandwich. The name Donovan Halpern scribbled on the signature line. My street address printed on the delivery line. He'd been living here, sleeping under my roof. Maybe while I was asleep on the couch. Maybe while she was out, and he was quietly upstairs. I should have called the police, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down at my old desk, opened my laptop, and did something that I hadn't done since I left. I logged into Lena's email. The password hadn't changed. In the archive folder, I found something I wasn't supposed to see, an email chain with Donovan Halpern, using his real name. They talked about narrative pacing, emotional consistency, protecting the ending. But what shook me most was that the email wasn't just between the two of them. There was a third name copied in. Marcia Fallon, literary agent. They weren't just cheating. They were selling the story. It wasn't a blog. It was a manuscript. Each post, each scene I thought I was discovering on my own, had been planned, structured, edited. They were pitching a book about a man who doesn't know he's being erased in real time. A husband being slowly replaced by a fantasy. A meta-narrative, as they called it. I wasn't just a ghost in their story. I was the product, the plot twist, the human cost they'd turned into content. I stared at the email chain for over an hour. I reread every sentence, every note, every smug correction from Donovan about structure and emotional flow, like my life had been nothing more than a novel they were refining. They discussed me like I was a symbol, not a person, like I had no agency, no voice. But what struck me most was how confident they were that I'd never speak, that I'd just vanish quietly into the background while they finished their perfect little tragedy. They thought they knew the ending, and that is why they lost. I didn't scream. I didn't expose them. I didn't burn the house down or throw her things onto the lawn. I did something they never expected. I disappeared on my own terms. The next morning before sunrise, I packed what was mine. Not much, just what mattered. A few journals, some clothes, my tools, my late mother's photo album. Everything else, let it rot. I left no note, no boythimade, not even a forwarded email. Instead, I quietly scheduled a withdrawal of all remaining funds from our joint account. The one she'd forgotten I still had access to. Not $1 more than what was fair. Not revenge, just balance. Then I drove, not in circles, not in anger. I drove toward a life where I wasn't someone's forgotten subplot. 3 states away, in a quiet town I'd only passed through once on a road trip, I found a small cabin posted for rent, the kind with creaky steps and a porch that smells like pine. The owner was an older man named Greg. No questions, just a handshake and a key. There I started over. I got a job helping a local carpenter restore old furniture. It's slow work, honest, no Wi-Fi. No spreadsheets, just wood, nails, and the kind of silence that doesn't judge you. For the first time in years, I woke up without wondering who I was disappointing. Weeks passed, then a month. Then one morning, I walked to the post office, and there it was, a small padded envelope with no return address. Inside, a paperback copy of Fragments of the Unspoken. The book. It was real. Published. They had done it. The cover was minimal, dark gray, gold lettering. And inside, it was just as I remembered from the blog. Beautiful language. Sharp metaphor. Romantic poison. They even kept my name out of it. But they didn't know one thing. They didn't know I'd copyrighted my own journals months before I left. Quietly. Legally. Every written word I'd ever saved. All those moments she didn't care to read, I had protected them. And inside that padded envelope was a legal note tucked between pages 82 and 83. From her. Handwritten. Curtis, if you're reading this, then maybe you were never who I thought you were. Or maybe you always were, and I just never bothered to ask. I hope you hate the book. But more than that, I hope you found peace. Because I never will. I read it once. Then I closed the book, placed it on a shelf I built with my own hands, and walked out onto the porch as the wind moved through the trees like a second chance. And I smiled. Not because I won. Not because I was vindicated. But because for the first time in years, my story was finally mine again.